Hello again. Welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony.
And I'm their friend and guest, Alan Singer.
Educator-Historian Dr. Alan Singer is a veritable regular on Media Watch because of his expertise, and we're, as I always say, happy to have him here. We're putting this together the Wednesday before our usual Monday airing on Manhattan Neighborhood Network, being brought to you by the good graces of EVT Educational Productions, Manhattan Neighborhood Network when they air it, and the Zoom's technical facilities. And this is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and so it'll air the Monday after Thanksgiving. And so I wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. And let's jump right in. The the brouhaha and the turmoil surrounding Twitter. Bob, bring us up to speed on Twitter.
Well, the interesting thing is that even though this will air a few days after we tape, there'll always be something coming out of Elon Musk's Twitter account now that he has full control of Twitter.
Yep.
I mean, what's come out of the account lately has been so disappointing. It feels like a high schooler is running the show. But it's and I told a friend that if you want to see the true definition of a dumpster fire, just check your Twitter account. But yes, in the past few days, Elon Musk has reinstated former President Donald Trump's Twitter account, although up to this moment, it doesn't look like Trump has used the account. And he today, Wednesday, he has a poll out asking whether people who are suspended should be reinstated as long as they haven't committed a crime or posted egregious spam. So, I mean, that's how he's running the company. Just sort of by the seat of his pants.
Egregious spam. What's the definition of egregious spam? We're not talking about vitriolic racist tweets, just spam.
In his judgment, because basically he's the board of directors, so that's the base of that's the baseline that we're up against. But as we were discussing before we went on, just before we went on air, advertisers have been shooting out of Twitter like nobody's business. They've been pausing or leaving altogether. Ford, Chevrolet, Meta, the other, so that's Facebook, just either pausing or just pulling their advertising. And their head of safety quit, the person in charge of making sure that things are on the up and up in Twitter. So what we have here is a great social media platform that seems to be just burning its way through the atmosphere. The crash is coming because they won't have the money, they won't have the tech, they won't have the other people running it. Let's see how long they last.
Tell us a little bit about that latest tweet, the Wednesday today tweet this morning, I believe, but then he deleted it. But what was that what did he poke some kind of, was trying to poke some kind of, gin up some kind of controversy on the Mike Brown shooting in Ferguson?
In Ferguson in 2014. Elon Musk posted a tweet that said, in effect, I guess he found some "Stay Woke" shirts from that era, and he posted this tweet: "Stay woke shirts from the Ferguson protests. Obama's own DOJ proved this and exonerated the cop. Hands up, don't shoot was made up. The whole thing was fiction." That's his take on Ferguson, and Gizmodo does an excellent job of analyzing his mindset.
Gizmodo is the online outlet that sort of scours the internet and comes up with some of the most quote worthy things to talk about.
Gizmodo tends to be pretty thoughtful as tech sites go. Some of them aren't as deep as some of the writers for Gizmodo, and I might as well look at the byline. This is written by Matt Novak over at Gizmodo, but I'll quote them briefly. And it says that Gizmodo isn't going to relitigate what happened in 2014, but we do find it notable that Musk wants to reopen the wounds of that summer, either to stoke more controversy on a social media platform with the hopes that it generates attention for a site that's hemorrhaging advertisers, or simply because Musk wants to signal to his right-wing fans that he's well and truly one of them. Whatever his goal, Musk succeeded at proving he desperately wants approval from the absolute worst people on the planet. That's just a great way to put it, Mr. Novak.
I had assumed that there was some dimwit teenager who kind of hacked into Musk's account. And now I have to apologize to dimwit teenagers because it turned out it was Musk who hacked into his own account.
Yes.
Well, Bob, you know, on Media Watch, we have followed Elon Musk's company quite often because Elon Musk, by his actions, always seems to point to the fact that he's a diehard racist white supremacist, because things were so bad at that Tesla factory out in plant in California a few years ago. The black workers just sued him for discriminatory practices, and they won and were given a judgment of like $133 million when you added the punitive damages in, etc., which meant that the jury really thought he was egregiously racist and discriminatory when they came down with that judgment. But of course, we know subsequently some, I guess, sympathetic judge to Mr. Moneybags knocked down their $132 million, or something like 12 million. So,
yes,
you know, right-wing racists flocked together. And I'm saying, don't know his name. I think it was a male judge. Yes, it was. I remember that correctly. But what was his business to be knocking down their judgment? The jury said what the jury said. It wasn't his business to be dealing with their findings. But anyway, but yeah, Musk is a racist white supremacist.
Well, you know,
say it again.
we now know the definition of libertarian because Musk defines himself as libertarian. So libertarian apparently means if you're rich enough, you could be a big enough SOB and be racist and nasty to anybody you want, lay off half the workforce so you can run a company with nobody doing the work.
Yeah.
That's the definition we now have of libertarian.
Weren't the John Birchers libertarians? The guy who founded the John Birch Society, wasn't he a avowed libertarian? They've been known to be white supremacist racists. I mean, you know, I'm not saying all libertarians are, but they seem to be running a trending pattern. Is that what they call it? A trending pattern in that area? But anyway, but the fact that he reinstated the whacked out racist white supremacist former so-called president, because I still don't consider him a president, an aberration, but the fact that he reinstated his account speaks volumes as far as I'm concerned about who his running buddies are and what, and maybe because he wants the MAGA people to flock back to Twitter. Maybe that's the reason why, but bottom line is they can have each other. But speaking of the former would-be, wannabe, supposed president, there was a very interesting opinion piece that was done by Mr.
Ankar Kadori. Ankush Kadori.
Kadori. I have a hard time pronouncing his name and keeping it in my head, but he did a phenomenal primer on the 5 legal cases that this former guy who was in the White House, I refuse to say his name on our show. As much as I don't want to anyway, I will slip. But and his bottom line, well, first of all, let's list those 5 cases. The first one, of course, is the latest one is the documents that he took from the White House. There's an investigation on whether he broke a law on that. Then, of course, the January 6th insurrection that he fomented, but the case is yet to be proven, but there's now a special counsel who has been appointed to actually oversee the DOJ, Justice Department's investigation of that former occupant of the White House, so that, quote, there'd be no semblance of political partisans. So they brought in an outside person, so DOJ wouldn't be accused of being Biden's police force to go after his former opponent. The third one, I believe, is the Georgia criminal investigation on whether Trump and his people interfered with the election in the state of Georgia. And that's a criminal investigation as well. There is a civil suit in the state of New York that's actually in trial as we speak. I believe it started this week, previous week when we air. And that's the tax evasion fraud, possible fraud case that Attorney General Letitia James of New York has downright said, well, what did she call it? Not egregious, extraordinary fraud and whatever. She had her very, very potent language to describe why she was going after his businesses. He's not under the gun because his former money guy, Alan Weisselberg, refused to flip on him. So they don't have enough goods to go after him. And the last one, of course, is the New York District Attorney's Office, which theoretically are looking into possible criminal charges. But the DA has been dragging his feet. But I saw recently, did you guys see that headline? But now that the special counsel has been appointed, he's decided to jumpstart his criminal investigation into whether or not a crime was committed by Donald Trump and his people, surrounding people. But the article pointed out the fact that they're going after the Stormy Daniels payments as a violation of law. And I'm going, wait a minute, that's not where most of the hard work was done. They ruled that one out and said, that's the harder one, not really worth your time and effort. But evidently, new report is that's where he's going down to deal with that. So tell me a little bit about what you think is going to happen, Alan, historically. But Bob, first, on these criminal cases like Georgia, for instance, where do you think Georgia?
Well, I mean, Georgia, I mean, that's obviously the case where he found the Secretary of State looking for X number of votes to flip the state
And
and
he
to get
phoned
those
them
electoral
himself.
votes. Huh?
He's the guy who made the call.
Yes,
So
and
you
we have
can't
it on
say
tape.
That wasn't me.
Yes,
Okay.
it's on tape, and we know what's going on. And the funny thing about that is that with all that going on in Georgia, Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, is still in Trump's corner. He was trying to fight to get the early voting stopped in Georgia because of the Herschel Walker
The runoff
Warnock.
election. He was trying to fight early voting for the runoff.
Yes.
But he
So
lost.
yes. The court said yes, they can vote Saturday. So that's gone. But yeah, that's going to be a mess. Georgia's going to be a mess for voting in general. It's going to be a mess for Trump. We'll see how that turns out. But I know Alan has other perspectives.
Oh, no, there's a lot of things. Part of the difficulty is Donald Trump, over the last 60 years, has perfected a style where he never makes affirmative statements. I heard, can you find, where he didn't, it's going to be very difficult to prove that he openly requested, committed fraud. Even with the tax cases, he keeps on, well, these are matters of opinion. These are common practice. So it's going to be very difficult to get convictions, even if they go to trial. But then they're going to be appeals. One of the things that Trump appears to try to be doing, and this is what they did with the January 6th investigation, is they're trying to delay things as long as possible. With the January 6th investigation, they want to delay it until the Republicans have a majority in the House. With the criminal charges, they want to delay it until he's running for president in 2024, with the idea that they will not want to convict a candidate, they will not want to convict a sitting president. And if, heaven forbid, he gets elected president, he can give himself a pardon.
Depending on which state and which crime. defending.
Kaduri outlines is basically it says there are 35 ways that Trump could avoid punishment. But then the last question is, what do we want a former president imprisoned? And I worry about that, about the consequence of putting former presidents in prison. That's what happens in dictatorships when they get overthrown
Yeah,
by new dictators.
but we're a rule of law country.
Yeah.
That's what we state. And if indeed we want to abide by being a rule of law country, then as we keep hearing, no one's above the law.
Yes.
And when we get sworn into office, when we get sworn into the military, we don't take an oath to a person. We take it to the Constitution of the United States of America, because that is our, quote, body of law that we're sworn to uphold. So that being the case, I don't care if you are a former president. If you have broken the law and we prove you have broken the law, you should find your rear end in a prison, especially if they convict you. Now, Kaduri, his premise was, from my reading that article, you can correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't matter, even if they nail him, because just as you stated, Alan, he's going to play it out that, oh, but this is not right. You can't put a former president in jail. And so I don't care if I'm convicted, you should throw out the sentence. You should just give me home arrest. Oh, you should just throw out the conviction. These are all things Kaduri is saying he could ask for. And because people are worried about the country being torn apart, about putting a man who was a former president in jail, he'll probably get it. I'm saying, no, we should not think like that. He convicted, he guilty, he should go to jail.
Well,
Say.
I don't want to hold up Brazil as any a paragon of a democratic society, but I mean we can see what they did there. The former president was put in jail, but that was mainly for political reasons.
Yeah,
And now he's reelected president, so he's managed the major.
Lula, whether Lula was actually guilty of the crimes they accused him of and threw him in jail for. And we knew that one was politically motivated. I still to this day don't know if there was any fire where that smoke was that they convicted him of. Yes. It was more smoke than fire, but something could have been there. But
the thing in Brazil is they needed him out of the way.
They said nobody's above the law. This is democracy. So even though you were president, you go to jail. So if Brazil can do it, I would think the oldest democracy could be able to do it too.
I missed what you said, Alan. What did you say?
And even though you're not guilty, you're going to go to jail because you went out of the way.
So if you are guilty, you definitely should go to jail. That's where I'm coming from. But anyway, let's circle back. Let's just say we could avoid all of this stuff if Congress would actually follow the Constitution as written. Because the 14th Amendment, Alan, you are a 14th Amendment expert. The Constitution as is written states that anybody, anywhere, shape, or form instigated any kind of insurrection type behavior against the federal government is forever banned from holding office. And there's enough stuff on this guy that Congress could easily vote to bring the 14th Amendment into play, correct?
Correct. That was done after the Civil War to prevent the Confederate officials who had rebelled against the United States from retaking office.
Mm-hmm.
Again, they were all pardoned and they all went back. And within 10 years, you had reestablished Jim Crow in the South.
Yeah, but I'm saying they were barred from taking office while they were convicted of insurrection.
Yes.
So he can be barred from taking office if he's convicted of fomenting an insurrection. Depending on how fast this special counsel works, they could actually try him for fomenting an insurrection and possibly convict him.
I just don't think that's likely, Eric.
No. I'm just saying. And couldn't the House actually raise it in the House, not just a criminal trial? Can't the House? That's where we actually.
No, a criminal trial would not be in the House.
But But
it would have to
violation
be-
of the clause would take place in the House, correct?
Right. Once he was convicted, then it would be up to the House to essentially to enforce it and say this violates the 14th Amendment. But again, we're looking at a House that is, even if he is convicted, that is very unlikely to do that. I wish it would happen. And I like the idea
The
of
Democrats,
getting him from office.
the Democrats still have the majority. Couldn't they convict him between now and the time they lose control of the House?
No, what happens in the House is they refer it to the Senate, where it
Okay.
takes a 2/3 vote to convict.
Yeah, okay.
That's never going to
Okay,
happen.
here's one scenario. Say, wouldn't happen, but say this House convicted him. And then they referred it to the Senate.
They would indict him. What the House does is
Yeah, the indictment. They hand up the indictment like they did when they impeached, right?
Yeah.
They hand that up, and while they still have a 50-50 Senate, they could put the trial in there for the Senate to say yea or nay, right?
it was an impeachment, it would require a 2/3 vote.
But
Something like this would,
violation of the clause, is that also 2/3?
no, that would probably be a majority vote. However, in the Senate, you have the filibuster rule. And because of the filibuster rule, you would have to get 60 votes in order to bring it to the floor, and it's not going to happen.
Well, think about this outside. You just saw that Republican convention in Las Vegas, wherever it was. And a whole bunch of people got up and say, we don't need another Donald Trump. Our party needs to change, blah, blah. There are a whole ton of people who are all now thinking of running against him. Don't you think there's some senators who might say, oh, maybe that's one way to get him off the playing field. Let's just go ahead and make him ineligible by voting with this Democratic House to bring the 14th Amendment against him.
Well, this is what's going to be interesting, let's say in the Republican primaries for president starting in 2024. And that is, in the primary elections, the tendency is for the more extreme members of the party to vote. So what's going to happen? The likelihood is the Tea Party people, the MAGA people, will be more likely to turn out to vote. One of the things we learned in the 2022 midterms is that the MAGNAs were able to win the Republican parties, but the candidates they then nominated were not able to be elected because they could not swing the swing voters.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the tendency in the party. So my guess is Trump will do better in the primaries than he would in a general election.
Yes, and I'm saying if they wanted to block him so he's not even in the primary, they join the Democrats.
Eric, I agree that some Republicans are starting to pivot from Trump. I mean, that's what we started to see here in these midterms. Some Republicans actually saying that we don't need, 4 more years of that. But I don't think we have enough Republicans with the guts to lay down a vote in something like that. They're still pretty gutless, even the ones that are doing that are complaining. I mean, I don't even want to talk about Mike Pence, who is not even in office right now.
Yeah, right.
But he's a good representative of saying things but having no guts behind them.
The gutlessness of the Republican Party. Okay, I'm not going to belabor the point because I think actually that was a devil's advocate argument. I think both of you are correct. I don't think they're going to try to. My outside hope is one of these cases like Georgia is going to stick criminally, and then we're going to be forced to bite the bullet, because I think in Georgia he would stand a 50-50 chance of getting convicted if they bring that indictment. Interestingly enough, because that's a Fulton County DA, so they're going to probably pick that jury from that particular county for that trial, because that's where that law was pretty much, well, it's a state law, so they could ask for a change of venue.
Is that something that could be turned into a bench trial upon request of the defendant? Because then I'm worried about the judges.
I don't think so. I think I shouldn't say that because I don't know Georgia law, right?
I don't either.
But I think basically that's a 12-person jury trial. But
Okay,
anyway,
and,
how much
and,
time
and
we
we have
got?
about 3 minutes.
We got 3 minutes. Let's segue over to COP27 because that's significant. Alan, you've done a number of blog pieces on that. Bring us up to speed and good, bad, or indifferent, and where do we stand in 3 minutes?
Well, the United Nations runs this annual conference reviewing where the world is in terms of the impact of climate change. And Antonio Guterres, who's the Secretary General of the UN in the keynote speech, said, this is a total disaster. We are right at the cusp of a tipping point that will bring collapse. Now, the climate activists like Greta Thunberg have been arguing this for a decade, that the UN Secretary General now is taking the same stand as important. But there are problems with COP27. One is that it's become a greenwashing event where major corporations all sign up as sponsors. They continue to pollute, but this way they could wear their green shirts. But the other thing that happens is whatever decisions are made don't bind on anybody. They basically call for people to volunteer to follow. 2009, a similar conference announced that the wealthy countries that have been polluting for 250 years should set up a fund to pay $100 billion to the poor countries that are impacted. The United States was billed $40 billion as the world's greatest polluter for the last 250 years. It paid $7 billion. Now, the United States and other polluting countries have now argued that they should not be liable. This is charity. We're doing this out of the goodness of our heart. Well, at the 27 COP, they did pass a resolution endorsed by the United States that they're going to set up a committee to investigate how we can pay this money off. But they didn't vote to do it. They voted to set up a committee, but there's no mechanism in place and there's no enforcement.
And we have about and we have about 20 seconds.
So
Okay,
I'm worried that nothing's going to happen and
they
it's just going to keep getting worse.
kick the can down the road again, and those countries that are about to be swallowed up will be swallowed up. Okay, this has been Media Watch, folks. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony. Catch up to us on YouTube at Media Watch EVT.
And I'm Alan Singer, their guest and friend who you can no longer follow on Twitter.
And we'll catch you the next time, folks. Stay safe.